Alrighty, hello everybody. Welcome to the fourth session of my Introduction to Computer Science class. This is a class about Python, and so far we've learned some of the bare basics, and also if statements and conditionals, and just basic math operators and stuff. So today we're going to learn about loops. Loops are a very important part of a program, especially if you don't just want it to run once. So I'll show you an example in a little bit of a guessing game that I just made, where you guess and then it keeps on asking you, but it uses the same code over and over and does different things based on what you type in, but repeats the same code, so you don't have to retype the code a bunch of times. So they're super handy, and you will use them all the time. So they're very, very important. Also, I'd like to apologize to everybody that I haven't been able to make a video in the past couple weeks because I've had marching band, and last week I got my wisdom teeth taken out, so some of you know how that is. It's kind of hard to talk and stuff. But I'm feeling better now, and I'm going to try to make a couple videos today, but we'll see what I end up getting done. So with that, this is day 4, and we're talking about loops. So loops are used whenever you need your program to repeat a certain code, a certain block or section of code a certain amount of times. And sometimes that certain amount of times is determined by the user. An example of that would be printing something out over and over. So say you want to print hello and print it 1,000 times. I will show you how to do that. It'd be very simple, just a few lines of code. Anyway, so there's 2 types of loops. One you'll probably use, I would say that I use this one about 30 to 40% of the time if I'm using a loop, which makes it very important. And it's called a while loop. And basically, it starts at the top here with the while. And this time I know you can see my cursor, or at least I think you can. Let's hope you can. Anyway, it starts up here with a while, and it checks on this Boolean, kind of like an if statement would. Actually, almost identically to an if statement. And then it runs the code if that Boolean is true. If the Boolean is false, then it will just skip over the while loop and all the code and go to what's ever below it. And after this little comment code. And the comment code is where you would put the code. However, if the Boolean inside of the while loop is true, then it will go ahead and execute the code inside. And then when it's done executing, it'll come back up to the while, and it'll check it again. If it's true, it'll run the code again, just like it did the first time. If it's false, it will exit the while loop and continue on with the program. And it just does that over and over until the Boolean is false. So as you can imagine, it would be very, very simple to create a program that just runs over and over. All you would have to do is say while true, because true will always be true no matter what. And whenever it checks if true is true, it will always be true. I just said true about 2,000 times, but you get the idea. So that would just execute this part here over and over. I'm going to go ahead and change this back. Sorry. Anyway, next slide. So that's a while loop. And the program that I'm going to show you, the guessing game, will use a while loop. So now we use this range method, this range function. For some reason, Google Slides kind of goofed it up, the presentation, so I'll just show it to you this way. Let me just make the font a little bigger. There we go. So basically with the range, you can either pass in 1 number to it or 2 numbers. And it does pretty much the same thing in both situations. But here we can see when you only pass it 1 number, it will generate a list, which is sort of another data type, but we'll worry about those a little bit later. And it's not terribly important what it puts out because you won't work with this, at least in this session. You won't work with the list. The for loop does everything for you. And I'll explain sort of what that means. Anyway, you pass in one number and it will give you a list starting at 0, going up to the number before the number you passed in. So as you can see, that's 9. Or another way of thinking about it is it generates a list starting at 0 with 10 numbers in it. So it's 2, 4, 6. Yeah, you guys can count. There's 10 items in that list. Another way of running this method is by doing this range, and then you give it a starting number, which in this case is 1, and an ending number, in this case 11. So it will generate a list starting at 1 and going up to 11, but not including 11. So as you can see, it goes 1, 2, 3, 4, and then all the way up to 10. And that's all there is to the range. And once again, you don't actually need to really worry about what it spits out right now. Only the for loop will take care of all of that for you. So going on to where that's applicable, it's applicable in a for loop. Now this is sort of the more complicated one, and it has a lot more functionality than the while loop and a lot more customizability, which is why I like using it, 70 to 60% of the time. Anyway, the way you, what it does is basically you say for x, or any variable for that matter, it should be a new variable that you haven't created. So if you've already said x equals something, then you shouldn't use x in here, because it will reassign values to x. So whatever value what you were previously storing in x is rendered gone, because of the for loop. So just use x, and honestly, I usually use I, j, and k for for loops, just because that's how I learned and it's stuck with me. So for me, if I were writing a program, I would say for I in range, and I'm not really sure why that is, but it's just how I learned and it stuck with me. You know how it is. Anyway, it works sort of in the same fashion as a while loop, but it will check. Well, sorry. You can see the range function. And there's other ways to execute a for loop, but using for a variable in range is definitely the most common. And then that basically will generate the list, and then the for loop will go ahead and assign x to the first item in that for loop. So as you can see, if we said range 10, sorry this is goofed up, but if we said range 10, it would assign x to be 0, and then it would run the code. And then once it was done with that, it would come up, assign x to be 1, the next item in the list, run the code, and then 2, 3, so on. Now x in this case, and why a for loop is handy, is because you can use that variable in the code inside of the block. So say you wanted to print out incrementing number 10 times, so going up by ones. You could say for x, and I'll go ahead and write this out on a different slide. Sorry, I like having titles. Go ahead and say for x in range of 10. So it's generating a list of 10 numbers. And basically that is saying assign x to each number in the list returned by range, or returned by this range 10 function call. Anyway, then underneath that in the code area, we'll put print, And remember, we have to call the str because it is a number. X is a number, string X. And then that's it. In this program, we'll very simply print out 0, 1, 2, 3. And I'll go ahead and stick that into idle right now, actually, and show it to you, just to prove to you that it works. So there's the code, just like was in there. Run module. Go ahead and save this as for test. Why not? .py. And if you guys didn't know, .py is the file extension for a Python source code file. So that's all that is on the end. Just like a .docx for a Word document or something. .py is for Python. Save, and as you can see, it printed out 0, 1, 2, 3, all the way up to 9. And that looks a whole lot like the list of numbers right here. So it basically just went through and printed out each one of these. Now, I'm sure if you're thinking about it, you can already think of a bajillion uses for these things because they're super great and they work in a lot of situations. But as I said, they're kind of complicated, but that's really all there is to them. So they're complicated compared to the while loop, which is just if it's true or not. It's sort of like a repeating if statement, I guess. Yeah, the for loop is a little bit different, but it's still not too hard. Now you might have gotten a glance at it, and I'm teaching my class. Sorry, I just had to do something real quick. Anyway, so this is the guessing game that I wrote just a minute ago, and it says import random, and you're not going to worry about that or this. But basically, the secret variable is just a random number 1 through 10. That's all you need to know. Don't worry about any of this stuff. I will get to that later. Anyway, I'm setting guess, which is another variable, equal to 0. And then I made a while loop that will run if guess is not equal to secret. So in the case that guess is equal to secret, then it will stop the while loop and run the code after it, which, as you can see, there is none. So in that case, it would just end the program. So inside of the while loop, I'm saying guess equals input, and then guess a number 1 through 10. So basically, you're asking the user to input a number 1 through 10. And I forgot to mention it, but I believe randint, this random thing, will create. It works a little bit differently from the range function in the way that it creates a number or picks a number. But I won't go into that too much. You can look that up if you'd like. But anyway, I'm saying if the guess, so if what the user puts in response to this guess a number 1 through 10 is below secret, then it says too low. However, if it is above secret, so the secret, remember, is the random number, then it will print out too high. And if neither of those are true, that means it must be equal to, secret must be equal to guess, which results in you win. And that's all there is to this program. So here is the game running. And as you can see, you might think a game like this might be more complicated than it is, but it's actually quite simple. So I'm going to go ahead and put in 2. And that's too low, so I'll say 4. But 8. That's too high. 6, hey, so it was 6. That's what the random number was. So I won. That's really all there is to it. If I go ahead and run it again, you will be able to see that it truly is a random number. 3, too low, 6, too low, 9, you win. So last time it was 6, this time it's 9. It's different every time. That's really all there is to this program. It's not too much, and that's all there is to for loops. Man, I'm not getting the words right today. Anyway, that's all there is to that. Thanks for watching, and but I have session 5 out pretty soon. Bye.